so that wild animals wouldn't come and destroy the sheep. A good shepherd boy also was good with a slingshot. You imagine him out there in the fields day after day, setting up stumps and setting up pieces of wood. He's got that slingshot, and he's practicing every day with that rock and that slingshot. And he continually swings that around and lets that rock go, and pretty soon he's just deadly accurate every single time. It was that same David who was good with a slingshot that came up against Goliath. Remember, Goliath was over 9 feet tall? And all of the Israelites were afraid of him. He was destroying the nation of Israel. And David said, I'll go up against him. And everybody laughed at him. David, you're just small. You're just a kid. What are you talking about? But David said, no, I'll go up against him. And so they put all of Saul's armor on him. And when they put Saul's armor on, it was too big. It was too clunky. David didn't feel comfortable in it. So he removed the armor and he went up against the Goliath, the giant Goliath. You'll notice in the scriptures, he never calls him a giant. He calls him an uncircumcised Philistine because he wanted to put him down and put him in his place. So David walks out, and the giant is there, Goliath. He takes that slingshot. He's picked up some smooth stones from the book Kidron, puts a stone in the sling, and he slings that around, and he lets it go with deadly accuracy. And the only place Saul didn't have armor was right here. Hit old Saul right in the middle of the forehead, and down he went. David ran over and cut off his head and held his head up and talked about this uncircumcised Philistine. David was a man after God's own heart, the Bible says. So it's this David, little boy David, young man David, that's out in the field. He's shepherding the sheep. He had to make sure that they were cared for. And then he thought about his life. And he said, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod, thy staff, they comfort me. Thou dost prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David knew he didn't walk this world alone. Gary knew he didn't walk this world alone, that he had a God that watched over him and cared for him. In fact, in the book of Psalms 139, the psalmist says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that he knows who we are before we're in our mother's womb. And I think it was not just happenstance that Gary met Sherry, and they began their new life together. I think God had that planned out a long time ago, even before they were conceived in the womb. And Gary and Sherry started their adventure together, quite young, but started their adventure together, much like many of us. They loved to get each other, they laughed together, they cared about each other. They went through good times and they went through hard times, but most of all, they just loved each other. So it is fitting that as we talk about Gary, we talk about Sherry, because they were a team to be reckoned with. They were a force that was going to change the world, and did in so many ways. To their union, a son, Jamie, was born. Jamie was kind of a surprise, but that surprise turned out to be the love of Gary's life, Archie's life. He fished with him, played with him, tried to guide him in the way that he knew he ought to go. Jamie was there in Gary's last few weeks of life, cared for his dad, making sure he had water to drink and that she was comfortable. And when he needed to go from one room to another, it was Jamie that was right beside him, leading him from one place to another. He loved his dad, and his dad loved him. So that's why we celebrate Archie's life today, Gary's life. I say Gary, you understand, I mean Archie too, because most of you know him as Archie. Then there was another passage that we talked about. It's found in the book of John. It's in the 14th chapter. Oh, you've seen the famous painting. In fact, I thought I saw one here not too long ago, or someplace here. It's of the Last Supper. And all the apostles are sitting around this table with very straight chairs. You know, Jesus is the guy in the middle. He's got the halo. But that's not what the Bible says. It happened at all. They came together to eat the Passover feast. And when they came together to eat the Passover feast, they reclined at the table. They kind of laid down and leaned on their left elbow. And they ate leisurely the Passover feast. It was a celebration when the Lord God passed over and didn't take their firstborn. It was a day of celebration. And there at this Passover feast, they talked about the blood of the Lamb and how that if you didn't have the blood of the Lamb on the doorposts and the lintels, the Lord God would pass over, or he would pass over and take your son or your firstborn. But when he saw the blood of the Lamb, he passed over. Jesus knew in a few hours he was going to be that sacrificial lamb. And he knew that those apostles that were gathered around the table with him wouldn't understand. And so he looks at them and he says, "Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also, and you know the way that I'm going." And Thomas pipes up. I kind of like Thomas. He's a little like me. He says, "Lord, we don't know where you're going. How do we know the way?" Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. If you would have known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on you have known him, and you have seen him." And then there was one other quick passage that we talked about. It's found in Revelation, the 14th chapter, verse 13. And we thought it was fitting to read this little few verses about Gary's life. "And I heard a voice from heaven saying, Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds will follow them." So we're here to talk about Gary's deeds that follow him. The smile that he always had, the hard-working nature of a father that wanted to provide for his family, and if it took him away from home, he just worked hard so he could get back home a little bit sooner. Well, that's Gary. That was Archie. He said he was talking to one of his co-workers the other day, and one of his co-workers said, somebody else was there and said, "Well, Gary," and he said, "Well, who's Gary?" And Gary said, "Well, that's me." No, you're Archie." No, he says, "No, I'm really Gary." And the guy was really confused. Gary said, "I know, everybody knows me as Archie, but my real name is Gary Allen Stevens." Many of you know him as Archie. And we're going to live his life and talk about his life just a little bit together this afternoon. When I visited with Sherry, we talked about several things. I said, "Sherry, would you write some things down about his life?" And so we worked together on the obituary that was in the paper today, in the Tri-City Herald, and also the Wenatchee World. And the Wenatchee World's got a colored picture. Pretty neat, because it's that picture of Gary. And it just makes you stop and smile. Yeah, that's him. That's Archie. Gary Allen Archie Stevens passed away Sunday, May 3rd, 2015 at his home after a 7-year battle with colon cancer. Gary was born on October 8th, 1952 in Moses Lake, Washington, to Yule and Mary, but nobody knows her as Mary, to Jean, Ina Jean Stevens. Her last name, or her maiden name, was Simpson, but now she's a Stevens. Gary was raised and schooled in Othello, Washington. He played football there. He played baseball there. He played basketball there. He loved sports. and he was always involved in trying to improve his game. I can remember going to their house, and it would be cold around Thanksgiving and Christmas, and Gary and Paul and Tim and I would be out there shooting hoops. And Gary would always make a contest out of it. He was better at shooting hoops than I was. I don't know if he did as good as Paul, or maybe not quite as good. Paul always outshined him, I'm sure. Paul's here. Gary's not here to defend himself, but he always wanted to do better. So he had a basketball hoop just out in his front yard. They play hoops, shoot hoops. For hours, it seemed like. He liked playing basketball. They also had a little baseball diamond in the backyard. And they would practice for hours playing baseball. They'd come in sweaty and dirty, but always with a big smile because they had such a nice time. Well, that was Gary. He loved sports. He just loved being outdoors. He graduated from Othello High School in 1971. He was a lifelong member of the Church of Christ and was baptized in the Othello Church of Christ as a young man. He met Sherry Stone while they were in high school. They were married on December 23rd, 1972 in Othello, Washington. Gary worked in the grocery business, living in Colfax and then moving to Ephrata, where he worked as an assistant manager. In the mid-1970s, they moved to Kennewick, where he worked for Albertsons for a time. Then Gary went to work for Fleener's, Jack's Bargain Bar there in Othello. His mother worked there too. She may have had an in for Gary to be able to get into that store. But in 1978, Gary was offered a job with General Telephone Electric. We knew it as GTE, as a lineman in construction in Kennewick. He went to work in Kennewick until they transferred him in 1997 to Wenatchee. Gary worked for GTE through all the name changes. GTE, Verizon, Frontier, I don't know what it's going to be next. But Gary liked working there. He was an outdoors person. He liked to put things together and make sure everything was correct in what he was doing. After he retired in 2012, he took a part-time job as a bus driver for Link Public Transportation. And he liked that because guess what Gary liked to do? Talk to everybody. That was his pastime. He just loved talking with people. Perfect job. As he'd get on the bus, he'd have such a conversation. Sometimes he'd be late on his route because he just liked to visit. That was Gary. Gary was a member of the Eagles 204, and he served as a trustee right here for 5 years. It's so fitting that we have this at the Eagles Club today because he was so proud to be a part of the Eagles and the work that they do and the difference that they make. He was a member of the CWA Union, Communication Workers Association Union. One of his pastimes was restoring a 56 Ford that his dad bought and drove to work for years. Finally, the engine just was pretty tired, but Gary wanted it, so he bought it from his dad. I remember it was kind of patina, is that the right word? The paint was pretty much gone. But by the time Gary got done putting about 6 coats of wax on it, it looked pretty good. And his goal was always to restore that 56 Ford back to its original. And so he and his brother Tim, and maybe Paul got involved in that too, I don't know, tore that 56 Ford apart, sanded it all down, got everything painted, put a brand new engine, about $5,000 engine in it, $4,800. Gary was so proud. All we needed to do now was put the bed in the truck and put the fenders back on and the bumper back on and all the pieces back on. And it was all in parts, all in his garage. But that was his goal. That was his hobby. He's going to make that thing run like brand new. Well, as happens in life, he became more and more ill. He knew he wasn't going to be able to restore that 56 Ford. So he did something he didn't want to do. He put it on Craigslist to be sold. And a man not too far, just from Chelan up here, came down and said, I'd really like to restore that 56 Ford. And so he gave him the money and took the 56 Ford away. And Gary knew it was in good hands because that 56 Ford is being restored to this day. I thought it would be neat if he just drove down here and had it in the front parking lot. But we didn't get to talk to him about it. But that was one of Gary's part-times. That's what he liked to do in his pastimes, in his part-times. Just thinking around the house, working on that 56 Ford. His home was always impeccable. His lawn had to be cut a certain way. When he became ill and couldn't cut the lawn a certain way, Sherry would cut it. Like a good wife. And he wasn't critical, but he'd come out and look at that grass and go, the lines need to go this way, and you've got them going this way. And that was Gary. He wanted everything to be perfect. Appreciated what she did, but could she just cut it a little different?
Yeah.
So that it was never cut the same way twice, isn't that?
Correct.
That was Gary. Liked everything to be taken care of. One of his jobs, he built a deck off the back of his house. And it has real glass windows in it because I know the wind blows here once in a while. And so instead of putting plexiglass, because it was blow out, Gary got some tempered glass someplace, and he put panes of glass in that deck so that they could sit on the deck and not be blown apart. But you know what happens to glass in a dust storm? It's dirty. So Gary would get out there, and to this day, I don't know. I looked down there, and I don't know how he got there and cleaned that outside glass. Well, when Jamie's son came, guess what? Gary said, I can't stand those dirty glasses out there. So Jamie learned what it was to clean that glass and get out there and hang on the edge and clean the glass windows. Because Gary just wanted it to be right. He wanted it to look nice. He was very proud of what he had achieved with God's help and with Sherry's help. What he achieved in life was important to him. These are some of the words that Sherry wrote. I thought I'd share them with you today because I think they mean so much and say so much. Sherry says, after high school, Archie and I dated during the summer of 1972. Well, let me back up a little bit. For some reason, Yule and Jean put their house up for sale. And Sherry's mother and dad came up to Othello. They were going to have to move to Othello, so they went to look at the house. And they thought it was pretty nice. Well, when they went back, the sign was already down. But that's when Sherry met Gary. And then she liked to go up to the grocery store just so she could talk to him. Now, Mother didn't know that, but that's really why she was there. And Gary, being the type of person he was, just loved to visit. So he'd visit with her. And Sherry said, because in Othello, it isn't a big town. But it's got one main street. What do you do in the main street for teenagers? You go up and down. Sherry had a 69 tripod GTO. And Gary had a blue Fire. Well, they'd all gather at Aiken's parking lot, all the teenage kids. And they would talk until Sherry was with her boyfriend. And she says to her boyfriend, pull into Aiken's there. And pull next to that blue Fire. And when he did and stopped, she got out the door and jumped in the car with Gary and said, just go. The boyfriend had a puzzled look on his face. And Sherry knew what she was after. She wanted to get Gary. Then the story goes on. After high school, Archie and I dated during the summer of 1972. My life would forever change. Learning the news that I was pregnant, Archie said to me, we could get married. I knew then what a responsible husband and father that he would be. He didn't have to stay, but he chose to stay. He wanted his child and he wanted me to be his wife. So together, we started out so young and knew nothing of the roads that lie ahead, and 2 became 3. After 42 years of marriage together, his devotion and love for me and Jamie was truly meant to be. He was always my rock and my voice. When I first met him, I thought, okay, this will work out perfect because he does all the talking to everyone, and I was so shy I didn't have to say anything. Gary would lead the conversation. Well, as all of you, as family and friends know, he never met a stranger. Such a wonderful person was Gary Stevens. I sometimes wonder why he never had a career in sales, because he liked to talk so much. He was a great provider, working away from home whenever it took him to, just to make ends meet. He always worked hard all his life to make our lives just a little bit better. In fact, I know this, he spoiled Sherry pretty rotten. If she wanted it, he would work hard so that she'd have it. That's how much he loved her. Sherry says, he left me with great memories, and I will treasure all of them in my heart and mind to carry me through this very sad time. A couple of camping memories she wanted to share. I read through those, thought these are pretty good camping memories. She said this always made her laugh. The time that they were camping with her mother and dad, and she said, I drove the pickup to a restaurant to have dinner. Gary and Dad put 2 lawn chairs in the back of the pickup. And I was driving to the restaurant. And all of a sudden the restaurant was to the right and I wheeled in there. She says I saw arms, legs, and chairs flying off the edge of the pickup. We thought it was funny. He said that's the first time, one of the times that I saw that red hair really come alive. They still laugh about it to this day. Another camping trip that will forever bring a smile is when camping with Mom and Dad, we decided to play cards, and we were sitting at the picnic table. Dad and Gary on one side, Mom and I on the other. And we decided we'd get up and get something to drink. So as they got up off the chair, the seats, you know what happened. Over the picnic table goes, and Gary and Dad are on their backs, laughing uncontrollably, because they should have thought about what was going to happen. I still think about that. He was loving, kind, so strong. He was the funny love of my life, and he was a wonderful dad. I can't imagine my life without him. Together, we were a whole. My heart is broken, and I'll never go a day without thinking about him. And I hope and pray that he puts a smile on, I put a smile on his face, because he always put one on mine. I'll be able to go on. I'll always love him forever, just like he loved me. Jamie and his family were the #1 priority in his life. He especially loved all of his wonderful friends that came through in his life. And he felt everyone's love and support, especially during these last 7 years as he was going through the treatment for colon cancer. You guys came to the hospital. You guys came to his house. As his life began to fade away, you were there. Which tells me a whole lot about your love for him and why you're here today. And his love for you. He truly changed your life. And then Sherry says 2 words at the end. Go, Hawks. He was the 12th man guy. And if you ever went to his house, you see that flag flying off of their back deck. This is what Jamie writes about his dad. Growing up, I never understood how hard of a worker my dad was until I spent 2 years as a contractor for the phone company doing the same kind of work that he did. Looking back, it gave me a new appreciation for his dedication to provide for our family. I knew that I couldn't walk in his shoes, so I made a detour to work for the cable company. In hindsight, that move was a blessing, allowing me to provide for my family. I owe a big part of my success to my dad. Well, Gary was a master at life, but he was a master at paper airplanes. You ever seen fold paper airplane? He loved to fold paper airplanes. In fact, if you came to his house, he would challenge you. Let's go out on the back deck and fold paper airplanes, and we'll throw them off the deck. Well, he was a master at it. He knew good and well that you could never make a paper airplane as good as he could. And so he'd throw his and it would go, it seemed like, for miles. And you'd make one and it fall right off you to the deck. Well, he shared that with his son Jamie. So now Jamie thinks he's a master paper airplane maker. Gary loved just doing simple things. Simple piece of paper to make a paper airplane, to be able to throw off the back deck in a contest. He liked contests, even spinning candy dish lids. That's what Jamie remembers about his dad most of all. As we said earlier, Gary, Archie never met a stranger. He talked to everyone. He loved to barbecue. And even when he had been pretty ill, I think it was about probably 6 or 8, maybe 9 weeks ago, we came up to see him. Well, you know what he had to do, because we brought Mom with us. He had to barbecue hamburgers. As sick as he was, he went out there and fired up the barbecue and he put hamburgers on it. They were great. And he even got to eat half a hamburger. And that's the first he'd eaten for quite a while. Made him sick a little later, but he didn't care because he was with family. And barbecuing hamburgers was very important to him. To be able to provide for others, because that was Gary, always giving to others. Don, his brother-in-law, said, whenever we take Archie, they call him Archie, whenever we take Archie with us downtown to go shopping at Costco or any place, we knew we had to plan an extra hour because Gary would meet somebody in there, even if he didn't know him, and start talking to him. And so it took him 2 hours to go to Costco instead of just 1 hour or less. But that was Gary. And that's Don's memory of him, one of his memories, that Gary was just a talker. Then Ginger writes, this is his sister Ginger, his older sister, mind you. And life was pretty good for her until one day this boy came along. Hadn't been there very long, and finally she crawls up in her daddy's lap and says, Dad, you remember when it was just the two of us? Wasn't that better? Ginger loved Gary, and Gary loved Ginger. Gary loved the outdoors, she says. He loved camping. He loved walleye fishing, working out in his yard, and just seeing all of God's nature. He and Sherry took many trips enjoying God's beauty. They took a 6-week trip in their motorhome across the United States last summer. A trip that was memorable, and they both enjoyed it so very, very much. Gary also loved eagles. At the graveside on his casket were 6 eagles that they had put on the side of the casket because he loved eagles so much, and the American flag. If you'll notice on your tables, there's a blue carnation or a white carnation with blue tips because his favorite color was blue, but in that same vase there's an American flag. And so when you leave today, you can't take the vase because they belong to the eagles, but you can certainly take the carnation and the flag in memory and the ribbon in memory of Gary. He would appreciate that, you remembering him every day. He admired the eagles' strength and their beauty. From his deck overlooking the Wenatchee River, he could see many eagles, and he watched and admired their strength and their courage and their dedication and their tenaciousness. These were all traits that Gary exhibited as he fought for the last 7 years with colon cancer, which had invaded his body. His strength and courage were lessons for all of us. So it's appropriate that we have a celebration of his life at the Eagles Banquet Room, and that's why we're here today. Eagles are our country's national emblem. But when it comes to relationships and maintaining relationships, eagles soar much higher than many in this country, in the country that they symbolize. Eagles typically mate for life and maintain those relationships, and they make a lifelong adventure together with their mate. Well, Gary did that. And it's evident, by all of you who are here today to celebrate his life. When Gary and Sherry married, they were soulmates for life. Their bond together was so strong and enduring that it made other people just a little bit jealous that they could love each other as much as they did. Through the years of struggle and illness, Sherry has been a tower of strength to Gary, standing by him, giving him the love and the encouragement that he needed to be able to go on. She's a tower of strength. I never heard her complain. I never heard her say, oh, I wish things were better. She would like them to be better, but she took them the way they were. And she would help Gary out of bed in the morning, and they would struggle to the living room where he could sit in his favorite chair. And they would just visit and talk together. If she'd leave the room, when she'd come back in the room, Gary would light up because he knew the love of his life was coming there to help him and to encourage him and just to nurse him and to make sure that he was okay. He used to say, I am so lucky to have Sherry in my life. And Sherry feels the very same way. His son Jamie, as I said earlier, was here to help Gary and Sherry through those last few weeks of his life. They were a precious family together again. And then Ginger writes, eagles are amazing creatures. When eagles age, they renew themselves by plucking out all their feathers and hitting their beak against a rock until it's gone. And once their beaks and talons are growing back and finally grow back, they are able to be strong again. But during all that time, they're kind of in a molt. They lose their desire to eat and no longer see very well. They rest alone, bathing in the sunlight. And they can endure until that time that their bodily appendages grow back and they're reborn with new strength. The eagle's travail teaches us no matter what state of personal adversaries, if any man endures to the end, he can, with God's help, emerge victorious. We believe that Gary did this. Isaiah 41 verse 10 says, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. And then Ginger said, there's a song that I saw on the internet. It's entitled On Eagle's Wings. I'd like you to listen to the words, read the words of this song, and think about Gary, and think about his life in being a life of living for others.